welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started today. We've got a limited amount of time, and I already have 3 questions, so want to make sure we try and get to everything. I'm Guy Walker. I'm the 2017 chairman of the board for the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce. And if you all would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone, for coming this morning, and thank you to our legislators who also joined us. Meetings, as you know, these meetings are hosted by the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce, and this one in particular is sponsored by AT&T, so we want to thank them. I don't think there's a representative in the crowd, so. With us this morning are Senator Randall Hardy, 24th District, Representative Stephen Johnson, 108th District, Representative J.R. Clays, 69th District, actually switched around, Representative Diana Dirk, 71st District, and then Representative J.R. Clays, 69th District. The format of the meeting today, we'll have brief opening remarks from legislators, questions from the audience. Please write your questions on the paper provided. State the name of the legislator to whom the question is directed and hold them up, and someone will come around to collect them. We'll do our best to get to all of the questions. Don't be offended if we aren't able to. We obviously have a limited amount of time. And then about 9:45 we'll stop and we'll let the legislators have some closing remarks, and then we'll end at 10 o'clock.
This is my very first appearance, and so I'm hopefully I'll give you a little bit of information that's helpful to you from the Senate side of the angle. I've been assigned 4 committees. When I went to Topeka, I was given a sheet that said, "What are your preferences for committees?" And so I said, "Well, here they are." So I gave them actually 6 to cover my bed a little bit, and I was assigned to ethics, elections, local government. That's all one committee. Judiciary, transportation, and utilities. Why can't I remember that one? Already flustered. Sorry about that. Utilities is actually kind of interesting. We've only had one bill that we've been working on in that particular committee. But anyway, one thing I wanted to mention to you before I forget, also, over on the table is a clipboard. If you would like to receive an email newsletter that I send out weekly, I'd love for you to leave your name and email address back there so that you can be informed. I want everyone to know as much information as possible about what's going on back in Topeka. One thing on the Senate vote yesterday that we took, it was a little bit of a nervous time for me because I was hoping that the bill would pass, and we didn't know exactly how it was going to go. I voted in favor of it. Of course, I voted for the bill the day prior to the famous 9 Democrats and me vote. I was that particular bill was one that I resonated with because it closely resembled my platform during the campaign, and I felt like I should support that bill, and I did for that reason. And then yesterday, I also supported the bill that was sent over to the Senate by the House. I felt like it was a strong bill, although it does not get the state back to a fiscal structural balance of the budget. It does stop the hemorrhaging, and that was important to me. And but it was a close vote. It was a bipartisan vote. We had of the candidates that were elected in August in the August primary, all 8 voted in favor of the bill. And also 8 Democrats voted for the bill. So it became a bipartisan effort as well. And so I'm hopeful now that the government will choose just to do nothing during the next 10 days, and the bill will become law. We'll have to see how that goes. So anyway, I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, and thanks to everyone for being here, the Chamber and AT&T for sponsoring. So good to see you. Look forward to your questions. My name is Stephen Johnson. I represent the 108th District, which is the southern part of Salina and Saline County, and then some surrounding areas. A number of issues that we've had a chance to work on. I know in this area, there was a lot of concern over the last year about the pension. I read a lot about it in the paper, a lot of concern about the bond, how we had handled different things. And while I'm not on the committee, I still have some work on that area, and I would welcome your plans. If you think we can do something better, let us know. That's an area that we can try and affect things. Generally, we've had good bipartisan action on that topic. The bond looks pretty good right now. The market's at a place where that decision looks very good, but it'll continue to change as the market goes up and down. Again, needs to be measured over longer periods than the short period of time where you could claim success on any given day. There was a lot written on the death and disability plan and what was done there. I am very open if somebody's got a better idea of how to handle the death and disability plan. That is now a pay-as-you-go plan. It's one that we look at what the liability is each year. The actuary recommends that we put in something over 0.8%. Rather than do that, historically, we have put in 1% because we don't know what our claims will be. Then as we get closer to the end of the year, we know what the claims are, and we true up to what the actuarial amount is. That usually results in not having to make the fourth quarter payment to the death and disability plan. If folks would be more comfortable with a level payment so that that doesn't change, if there's another way you'd like to structure that liability, I'd be very open to it. But there's often some more explanation behind what's actually going on in each of those plans, and I'm happy to get your ideas on how those can work better. This year, I am not on the pension committee, although I still talk with them regularly. I did switch over to the tax committee. The biggest issue that I saw for the pension and others was actually being able to fund things, and that comes down to a tax policy. So we started with that out of the gate. We introduced a bill on the first day of the session. We had our hearings starting in the first week. As I was aptly reminded, special thanks around here, not in making decisions, but helping keep us from making really bad decisions. Appreciate Jay Langley's time coming to Topeka on short notice with detailed questions to say what if, how, etc. And the group of CPAs across the state are a huge help to that process to try and figure out how implementation snags can occur. But really appreciate their time and specifically his time in coming, not to blame him for any policy because they don't take those positions. But they do help vet how the different decisions play out. We continued on that. The basis this year was looking at returning tax on the business side only due to the change that we saw. Again, last year we now have 393,000 businesses. And there is some growth in business that has occurred, but the growth in entities has been fairly great. The Tax Foundation consistently told us that the growth in the number claiming a business was greater than the growth in business, such that it becomes an opportunity to avoid tax than only an opportunity to promote growth. That was fairly widely agreed to across at least the House and I think the Senate this year. The question is what needed to go with it for two reasons. One, to get the balance people wanted to achieve, and secondly, to find something that could actually pass. That second part was a little harder. Number of hearings, a lot of hard work on the committee. What we passed, many of you I'm sure have read about it, but it does return tax to business. It does increase rates across the board from 4.6 to 5.25. And then a third rate was added in an amendment in committee to add another bracket starting at $100,000 at 5.45. The rates are set 1% below what the rates were in 2012. So they were 6.25 and 6.45. The bracket was extended a little higher for the upper bracket, but the thought being returning some fraction of that tax cut that was made, but not the full amount. Of course, there's also an increase in sales tax in the interim, so there's a different tax increase that has been there. But returning less than half of the cut that was made in the tax rate. One deduction we added back, and only one, was the medical expense. There are many deductions, and most of us would like to go back to just matching federal. And our consensus on that, well, probably wasn't a consensus. The general agreement on that is that it's the right policy, but not the right time. That we'll have to move more slowly. We felt restoring those deductions once we've restored a structural balance and stability is something we could do more easily. But we felt medical was one that was a problem in that good tax policy is spread broadly. Medical can be focused on you and you can't plan for it. I may not know I have that issue until November of the year. I at least know what I'm facing with my mortgage, with other things that are there, which are also good legitimate deductions. Anyway, that one was added back. And then another change, which is not overly huge to next year, was just taking away the calculation that eventually would reduce the income tax rate further. Certainly there's an opportunity to vote to decrease taxes at any time, but that mechanism then was removed in the bill, and those are the major components. We voted on it in the House a while back. In the end, it passed with 76 votes. It started with 83. Maybe if we waited long enough, we could have not passed it, but anyway, it did pass, and then as Senator Hardy has mentioned, they took it on that. So that's been the main effort. Where that goes from here is the large question as we look to balance the budget. The reality is, as I run the numbers, we still need to find something north of $100 million to balance the budget, whether that comes from KDOT, and there is some amount of money you can take in the KDOT sales tax. All of it is not a good idea, but there is some room that is there, and other things that will still have to be addressed in the budget. So that's the next step. We'll continue on some smaller issues as we move forward, but I look forward to your questions.
Again, thank you, AT&T and the Chamber, for putting this on this morning. It's always great to get back home and see a lot of nice, friendly faces. Sometimes you don't always see nice, friendly faces, and this is totally awesome. I'm not going to take up a whole lot of time on an introductory type speech this morning because I feel it's very important that we get to the meat of the potatoes of this meeting, and I'm sure most of you will have numerous questions on the tax bill. So I'm going to bypass a lot of the frills that we've done as far as the committees that I sit on. I'm vice chair of the Education Committee, of which is not really doing a whole lot right now. Most of the heavy lifting is on the K-12 budget, because we need to find out what the funding formula is going to be, where the money is coming from. So we've been kind of just holding back. There have been a couple of bills that have been talked about and done, amending the Tax Credit for Low-Income Student Scholarship Program Act. That's one that was put in last time for those really more or less to fund homeschooling in private schools. That is still on the table. Big thing is in veterans. I sit on the Veterans Committee, the Education Committee, vice chair of that one, and General Government Budget. That one has been enlightening. We get to look at all the budgets from all of the fee-funded entities in government and look at their budgets and make our recommendations, and then that is passed on to appropriations for them to decipher whether or not the money is going to be there to fill those budgets. I did come across one that I visited with our county treasurer, Mr. Du Bois, simply because it was on back when they had a modernization fund for vehicles where your license plate fees were increased $4, and that was supposed to go into a fund for technology improvement. I think the initial cost of what they were doing was $12 million. I was amazed when I asked him how much actually he sends out from our county. We do not get that money. It goes straight to Topeka for those entities, and found that in 2016 or 2014 it was like 200 and some thousand. 15, 16 looks to be the same. My concern was that the modernization fund actually is supposed to go in for that technology after that first initial outlay of capital to improve the technology. It was going straight into the general fund and had not been going into the fund of which it was designated. So I questioned that, and I had a reviser draft a bill for me. At that time, he thought there was $3 million left in that fund. Well, obviously, by the time we got finished with all the research, it was only around $600,000. That's still a chunk of change to me, folks. And I drafted a bill that would repeal the Vehicle Modernization Fund if it's not being utilized from which it was first created. $2 of those $4 go to increase the salaries of the Highway Patrol, which I thought was certainly we needed to have that. That still left $2 that maybe we could use elsewhere. And I was going to do on this educational relief fund. That was where it was going to go for me. Then I found out that they are going to actually use the funds and start putting it back into the modernization fund to finance cybersecurity across the state. So that is technology. But it was a little concern to me that money was not going to where it was supposed to. To me, it was an issue of transparency for those of you who pay that extra $4 on your license plate. So that was one thing. I think the biggest day of the general government budget of which I serve is the cosmetology and barbers. I couldn't get in the meeting room. They were full. They did not want to merge those, and they were very vocal about it. And so we did not merge them. They still have. But it was kind of ironic. It was the fullest that we've ever had in that particular meeting room. But I'm going to pass the mic down now so that JR has an opportunity and we can get right to the crust of things. And I'm sure you're going to have a lot of questions, especially on the tax.
Thank you, Representative Dirks. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to AT&T and, of course, the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce for hosting. Very much appreciate that and AT&T sponsorship. Just a few things. I'll go over some of the bills that I have and their progress through the system. Want to point out that Gatehouse Media now has Mary Clarkin in the Capitol every day to relay to us what's happening up there in Topeka in the newspaper here in Salina, which is great. Mary is a great American, and she does fantastic work covering so many committees and what's going on up there. So it is very helpful to have someone up there who's letting you know what's going on up in Topeka in the State House. I sit on Appropriations, Commerce, chair the Transportation and Public Safety Budget Committee, and new this year, sit on the Joint State Building Construction Committee. Just some of the things that we've been working on. I have a proviso for the Applied Aviation Research Center. You might have seen that in the paper already. That's $2.4 million over 2 years for an interim facility while we look to build a permanent structure on the K-State Polytechnic campus to expand the UAS program and to bring in research projects. HB 2036 is an aviation engineer tax credit that also rewards those who are getting tuition reimbursements. That incentivizes kids attending Kansas universities for engineering degrees. That has passed through committee and should get a day on the floor perhaps next week. Did a hearing on HB 2184. That's the reauthorization for STAR bonds. STAR bonds currently expire July 1st. So without this, we will no longer have one of the, if not the best, economic development tool that the state has to offer. It is extended out to 2022, I believe, in the bill. That was heard in appropriations and should hit the floor either sometime next week or shortly after turnaround. HB 2006 is the county commission election bill. That's a result of our county commission expansion here in Saline County and the process that we went through with having the governor appoint 40% of our commission. Senator Hardy over here is going to help shepherd that through the Senate. It's already passed through the House, so we've got it done on our side. It's a matter of how many amendments come on the other side now. HB 2108 had a hearing in Children and Seniors. That's the Grandparents as Caregivers Act. Introduced that to help out our grandparents who are serving essentially as parent in the parent role for their grandkids. In my role as the chair of the Transportation Public Safety Budget Committee, I presented on a new Lansing prison. That's a project that will allow us to use current funds and actually create savings, craziest thing, tearing down the current facilities at Lansing through a lease purchase, constructing a brand new modern prison. A new modern prison takes about 300 less staff. Through the savings in staff, we're actually able to pay the entirety of the lease payment. And then in committee, we were able to add a proviso that also says any additional savings will be put towards increases in pay system-wide for our corrections officers and others who work in the correction system. And then finally, in early March, I will present a committee plan that gets our T-Works preservation program back on track. You may have noted in the governor's budget that it takes quite a hit. We have a different plan that will maintain our top 5 ratings across the state highway system. And with that, we're ready to go.
You're ready to go? I don't think I have a single question directed at a specific legislator. So I'm going to try and kind of condense, because there's so many and they're all directed at everyone, I'm going to try and condense them a little bit, or combine them. You are correct. All of you are correct. Most of the questions, or many of them, are about the current tax law or tax bill. So this one says, with the current tax bill, explain your vote for it and why you, for it or against it, and why you voted that way. And perhaps as part of it, because there's a couple of other questions, maybe as part of your comments, also, if the governor chooses to veto it, what do you think will be done to balance the budget?
Well, I voted for it and worked towards that from the start. I would love to have voted for a smaller tax increase. I've done a number of runs to try and figure out what I can get by with. The original bill would have raised $50 million less. The amendment added a little bit to it, and I could absolutely work with that. As we get further in the budget, we may discover that we need more money. We may discover that it raises more than we initially anticipated from the Department of Revenue. I think both of those are possible. So there will be an opportunity to adjust either way. Our work on the budget is absolutely related to tax, but we have to look at what we have to spend. That can be more or less. So that work still has to happen for 18 and 19. I'm not optimistic for a lot of cuts because I think that we have worked hard on trying to find those in the past. So that was the key reason. Another key reason is I need something that can pass. A tax bill is always between a rock and a hard place, in that there are many very good reasons to vote no on a tax bill. And this one has many. So of the feedback, I've absolutely gotten feedback that it's not enough. I've gotten feedback that it's too much. Who wants to vote for a retroactive tax increase? That is pretty shaky ground. So it is then just trying to figure out what can we live with, and it is an amalgamation of poor options as you put that together. So the trade-off for the retroactive piece is, do you make it retroactive to January, in that if I change income tax today, much of the revenue I will receive will be next March, right? If I wait to make it effective in January of 18, which I would say is the right way to do it, then I just need to figure out a way to build that bridge to revenue for an additional 9+ months. So a little more challenging in that. Not impossible, but the retroactivity is not a good option. There are several others that are there. Paths forward. There are not a lot of good ones. If this type of a tax bill is not the direction that we go with a veto from the governor, shifting to the right, there are a few folks who will not vote for a tax bill because they do want us to focus on cuts that are a part of the legislative body, which is right. We need all voices at the table, and I think we have them, which is a good thing. I can maybe pick up a dozen votes if I shift a little less in tax, but I quickly lose groups of 20 on the other side. So that was where we really wound up trying to steer the direction of the tax bill to something that could work. So I'm not sure where we go there. It will be a new challenge to try and find a way through. And I think the ultimate direction will be somewhat similar to this one. How many times we have to go through the process will be given by the governor's decision next week.
Thank you. One other tough part of the fiscal situation that we are facing is that we have a hole to fill between now and June 30, but we also have a hole to fill next fiscal year, which I think is around $580 million, and it just gets worse from there. And so the issue is we need this bill in my opinion, in the worst way. I voted for the bill. I voted for a Senate bill on Thursday, which I think made headlines in Salina. It was the result of a week of activity. The Republican caucus had a tax plan, and it was brought around to me, and I looked at it and I said, I think I can support this plan. And by the time it got through the entire caucus process and got back to me, it was watered down quite a bit, and all of a sudden didn't look near as attractive to me. In that same afternoon, the minority leader caught me before a committee meeting, Utilities Committee, and he said, "Take a look at this. Tell me what you think." And so I looked at it, and it was my platform, and from the campaign. I said, "Well, man, I think I could support this." And he said, "Okay, that's all I need to know." So the next day, the bill was introduced, actually by a Democrat, and I knew that there weren't going to be very many Republicans voting for it, but I felt like I had to vote because it was my campaign, and I had my comments were don't you dare back down, and so I didn't. And I voted for the bill, and so it was 9 Democrats and me, and that's okay. I'm not a traditional politician. I may not be a politician at all. And so I'm just going to try to do what's right for the state of Kansas. And that bill, the reason I supported it was that it actually brought in more tax revenue that is needed desperately right now, unless we want to make budget cuts that I think everyone would find uncomfortable and maybe unacceptable. And I'm thinking at this stage of the game, they would be considered unacceptable because of what we've done already. And so on Friday when when I saw how the vote on the House side went on the tax bill, my thought was, you know what, Senate's got to pass this, and we're not going to add any amendments. We're going to keep it clean. We're going to make it as easy as possible because we want to send this thing straight to the governor. This may be our best bite out of the apple this year. And true to form, in caucus, we determined that there were not going to be any amendments offered, and the vote went pretty much as planned. We knew it was going to be close. We didn't know how few people, which way they were going to fall on this one. And we did end up passing it 22-18, which is sufficient to get it out. We need 21 votes to pass the bill, but it's not enough to override any possible veto. We need 27 votes for that. And my fear is that we could find a couple votes if we needed to, if there's a veto possibility for the bill, but my guess is we would not be able to find enough votes to override a veto if it comes down to that. So I'm hoping that the bill will be passed without his signature.
I voted yes on the bill. If you're if you're sitting in the seats where we are and you're looking out amongst your colleagues, you're hoping that we're all going to be able to come together and put something together that will help our communities and the people that we serve. And this year I can say that there were numerous new colleagues on the House floor, no matter what party they were, that we came together and we worked together in trying to get this passed out of the House. The Senate bill that was proposed, well, let's look at the governor's tax proposal. He would leave the LLCs alone, but raise their filing fees from $40 to $200, add $1 a pack to cigarette taxes, double the tax on other tobacco products, increase liquor taxes, touches income tax only to tax passive income, including rents and royalties, would raise $179 million. The striking difference between the legislative bills and the governor's proposal is it boosts state budget revenues by sweeping nearly $600 million from KDOT over the next 2 years and securitizing, whatever the word is, tobacco settlement payments to the state to raise $500 million over the next 2 years. It takes us right back to where we were. And I promised during my campaign that I would do everything that I possibly could to get us back on the road to solvency. We are near bankrupt. I mean, that's just the way it is. And I'm sure that you probably feel the same as I. If you look at what Representative Johnson, he's totally done an outstanding job in putting this together and getting those of us acclimated to exactly what it would mean to our state in order to get this tax bill. So without really going into a lot of detail, because you're going to be asking numerous questions, I'm sure, just giving you the reason why I voted for this bill. And I know people think, oh, well, that's a tax increase. But you look at the overall picture, fiscal year 18, $590.2 million will be generated with this tax bill. So that's why I certainly will continue to support it and hope that we don't have to use an override, that the governor will just let it go by 10 days and let us get this passed and get on to business is what we should be doing.
First, let me say that I appreciate all the work that Representative Johnson, Chairman Johnson, did putting this together. It's never easy to get 63 votes, let alone the 70-something that we were able to get on this plan. I was not one of those votes. I voted no. The plan does raise $590 million, but full funding of T-Works is $530 million, so I am curious to see what everyone's going to do with that $60 million they raised after I take that. But we will be back here doing this again. We will be back, and that's largely why I voted no. This is not a solution to the state's long-term fiscal problems. This is, again, a short-term solution. Not that the other solutions aren't short-term solutions, but I would like to see a more comprehensive way of solving this problem long-term, and that is to say that I will vote for a tax plan. I just wouldn't vote for this one. I'm willing to vote for a plan that includes HB 2036 and solves our long-term financial challenges. But here's the third leg. We always talk about three-legged stools, and there are budget cuts and there are taxes, but there's also growing our economy, and we continue to skip over that one every time we have these discussions, so I'm going to talk about it now. We have a unique opportunity to grow premium wage jobs, and we have the opportunity to do that right here in Salina. And we have the opportunity to create incentive programs that target and incentivize growth, incentivize job growth, and incentivize creating jobs. We have an emerging industry right here on the other side of Interstate 135, and if we choose to invest in those things, if we choose to put our effort into growing those jobs, then some of these problems will be solved long term, in addition to dealing with tax and budget issues. But we have to consider all three legs of that stool and not forget that economic development is a huge driver of success in our state, and I would just add that on to the discussion that's been had here today, and I don't disagree with my colleagues at all, and certainly don't begrudge them their vote in favor of this tax plan and their desire to solve the problem, but it just simply does not go go to solving the long-term fiscal problems that we have in front of us. And again, not that the governor's plan does. I don't support that either.
These were directed at everyone, so.
Things I'd like to see are full funding for all-day kindergarten. As far as things I would like to not see, I would like to not see any decreases in funding for school districts in this area. Again, just going back to the tax plan issue, I think we did see a school finance plan floated that has a price tag of about $979 million on it. We just raised $590. If we spend any money on T-Works, we're not there. So again, we aren't solving that long-term problem. But I'm certainly in favor of getting all-day kindergarten in there, and then also preventing any cuts in our region.
That's pretty much my concern as well. We have all-day kindergarten. It's so important. In visiting with some constituents who come to visit with me at the State House, we sit and most of the discussion is around education of our children. They are really worried about what's going to happen. You know, what kind of tax bill are we going to get? Are we going to be able to raise enough money, you know, to adequately fund our schools? That is my concern, and I am in hopes that we're able to do that. It may not be a one-day fix tomorrow, but over a period of time, as we elevate and get our state back to a stable position, but I think we have to concentrate on making adequate funding for our educational facilities here in Salina. The other representatives are worried about their own districts, but I'm concentrating here at home because this is where I live. The cuts, they were looking at one of the initial Senate bill dealt with cuts to K through 12 and higher ed, and that definitely would not have been anything that I would have voted for. So in essence, this tax bill, in its infancy, because there may be some changes made, I think it's the initial step to get us on track to where we're going. And the thing that is my concern is that we make sure that adequate funding is for those of our future leaders.
Well, I will be glad to follow on this, and we're lucky to have the Vice Chair of Education here who can help lead and direct that. So in general, as I'd look at it, I would think anything else we can do on the whole early education side is one of the greater needs that we may be under on. If I were looking at areas to do less of, that's a hard area to find, but I might be willing to look on the facility side. I think there are some places, and this is where we are so inconsistent, where our facilities may be above adequate and some places where they're below adequate. So how do we make sure that we try and get that to where it is? I've seen some classrooms where you go, wow, this really needs to be replaced. And I've seen some facilities where you go, wow, this is really nice. And there was some portion of state funding that's in that. There's also local funding that's in that. So that would be one area that I'd maybe try to see if we could be more consistent on the capital outlay side.
I am a big proponent of the adequate and equitable funding for K through 12 as well. We need to keep our eye on the goal of always providing enough funding for education so that kids don't suffer. I think that in addition to K through 12, one area I think we're missing out on some is the pre-K, because there's a lot of development that goes on in that level of childhood, and if we can capture some of that part of that age group and create a desire for learning before the children even reach the K level, then I think we've done a good thing for the people of Kansas. I think that we could, what we could do is I think that there are always ways to find efficiencies in what we do, and I like the idea of taking over half of our budget and trying to find ways to economize, to take advantage of efficiencies to scale, and I think that should be an ongoing process with education. The one thing that we have to be aware of, too, is that this tax bill that we passed, as Representative Clays mentioned, is not a permanent fix to our problem. Our problem is so bad that this is going to be solved in a stepwise fashion. The bill that was passed yesterday is part one. And we have to have a part one because to do everything in one fell swoop would have been to ask everyone to pay, instead of 5.45, to pay 8.45%. Percent of their income. And we felt like, you know what, that's not palatable. That's not even reasonable. And so we've decided that, my guess is in 2 more years, we're going to be coming back and taking another look at taxes because our situation is simply that dire. And for that reason, our budget is going to be flat the next 2 or 3 years. We will not have increases to much of anything. And that's why it's important for education end of the budget to be looking for ways that we can save money and economize. You know, one other thing that I think would be beneficial to education, especially out in the more rural school districts, is to take as much advantage as possible of distance learning through internet classes, through opportunities in conjunction with the local universities and that kind of thing too. So there are ways that we can make the system better, and I think that we ought to be looking at that. But we're not faced with happy times, even if we do pass this, or even if the bill does go through in another 10 days.
Unrelated to tax and budget, but maybe we'll continue on this thing maybe for a little bit, just a few more minutes, and then we'll get to some of those other questions because there are so many related to the budget and the tax issue. This next question is: what have you done to implement any of the $2 billion savings pointed out in the audit? And there's several questions related to that, but I think that one probably most covers, and maybe somewhat related to that is, if you are forced to cut dollars from the budget, where will it come from?
Short straw. The A&M study, we are actually in the middle of reviewing that once again. When we did it the first time around, we didn't put teeth into the recommendations. So if a agency chose not to do something, they simply just chose not to do it. This time around, I think that there will be more repercussions for not doing that. So in transportation and public safety budget, for instance, we stayed away largely from public safety agencies, the Kansas Highway Patrol, KBI, Sentencing Commission, those types of agencies were not impacted by the A&M study. They were kind of left alone. Department of Corrections, Department of Transportation, the way the corrections system is set up, it's running as efficiently as possible if you're not willing to do things like the Lansing project. They are at 102% of capacity on a regular basis. We're outsourcing, just as local governments are being forced to do, outsourcing beds. It's a very difficult situation that we find ourselves in with the Department of Corrections, so everywhere we can find savings, they essentially are. There are some things that require legislation, and we did last time float several things, especially some procurement-related things, because you would think that collective purchasing and buying power would just be easy things to pass, and we found that they were not. So that may be DOA. And then on the transportation side, we found about $20 million in annual savings there out of a budget that should be in the $1.6 billion range, but I think in the governor's budget for 19 is $1.006 billion. So you can see that you're not going to find a ton of money in that particular agency, though across the board, if you're just looking at the A&M study overall, there are certainly areas to find some savings, but only about 10% of that was found in the agencies which I oversee, and we are going to go get them.
Sitting on the general government budget, as I said, we're going over all of the agencies' budgets, from the Secretary of State to the barbers and cosmetologists. And in sitting and listening, we go over each item, and they're looking at ways that they can cut back, and they have. The agencies are really working diligently to cut the waste, which hadn't been too much to begin with, but at least trim the fat a little bit more. They're not hiring a lot of individuals. They're doing double duty. They're watching what materials that they use. They're trying not to be wasteful. They are just getting down to a clean, mean fighting machine because they understand what the dire conditions are. And in each and every one of those, we have hardly made any changes at all to the recommended budget before moving it on to appropriations for their consideration. They are diligently working to go by what the recommendations were without having to let people go. They're just not hiring anymore. And they're double dutying for right now until we get over this crisis. So I really truly feel that a full frontal look at all of this is really being implemented, and we'll just keep trying to make it even better.
So I was not on appropriations last year. I am this year, where we're just getting the reports of going over, but we've been working more on the rescission bill of how to get through 2017 and haven't dug into that one as much. So last year I was on ag budget, so we went through that one, and then I got the pension-related items last year also. In that, there really wasn't anything from the A&M study to work with, is the short answer. Ag budget is one of the smaller budgets. Most of our budgets are actually fee-funded for the other budgets that report to that committee, which means there are fees that are paid to wildlife and parks that fund them, to the Board of Banking, et cetera, where they pay the fees that are there. So that really didn't get touched by what they were looking at on a lot of those areas that were there. Then in ag, one session ago, we actually did our own effort and started with a zero-based budget rather than the incremental budget, and had started through that process. So there wasn't much that it happened to add on that budget. They did start with a number of recommendations on pensions, which at the end we found there was one that we could have done something with. They like to do a lot with the investment portfolio, and after we went over the investment portfolio with them, they decided we were doing all that we could. We're in the bottom 10% of the cheapest plans, and in the top quartile of return. So they backed off of that particular area in the study. The one that we could do more with was on calculation of final average salary. The main reason we did not go further on that one is last year I had a colleague in the legislature that had some more broad sweeping recommendations on final average salary calculations that had made people really sensitive to that area. So that one was not pursued. And again, that would affect the unfunded liability, which does affect funding long term. And then their main recommendation was that we put more money into capers. So actually it would have taken more dollars to fund it more adequately. So those were the things. To do that, of course, took tax money rather than reappropriations from other areas last year. So that was the reason we did not move on that particular recommendation.
I'm sorry, I did forget something that I'm sure that you would certainly be interested in. On each one of these budgets before being passed out, initially we made an addendum, and it became a global addendum, that capers to be fully funded in each one of these agencies. So that is connected to each one of them, that the capers to be paid. Just wanted to be sure that you knew that.
I don't sit on the Ways and Means in the Senate side. I'm more policy committee related. Most of our conversation the last 5 weeks has been related to the tax and fiscal part of our budget. The one part of the efficiency study that I have been in conversations with, though, is relates to the combining the health insurance plans for education, and I don't know that it's going anywhere or where we sit at that, but that part of it is being floated anyway on the Senate side.
This next two questions are both related to the state's selling, so to speak, of the tobacco funds. This one says, how can the state continue to use the funds designated for children, the tobacco settlement, and still sleep at night? What happens to the needs of the children? And so, similar, where do you stand on that issue?
As I think Representative Dirks mentioned, this is a part of the governor's plan to balance the budget, and at least from the people I talked to on the Senate side, there is no interest in securitizing the tobacco fund. We feel like it is a critical component of education and needs to remain there, and I can't even imagine a scenario where that's going to come up as an option for taking care of any of our fiscal situation down the road.
Same. I think a lot of us will agree on this one. I don't know of anyone that's looking at securitizing it. When I just looked at the price that we were offered, it looked like we were making about 12% on that money. I don't think I can rival that anywhere else. I know it is a risky flow of funds. It's not a perfectly guaranteed source, but it's worth more to us than I think any private investor. So that's a road I don't think we can go down. And to that end, that may mean the funds are not necessarily tied to that one source. It is what we're using towards that. So whether or not those funds are there, we still have the liability that was mentioned and the importance of meeting the needs that those funds go to. So somehow we have to fund that. Currently, I think those funds are the best way to continue doing it.
There wouldn't be any way at all that they could convince me to vote for them to use those funds. The initial tobacco settlement, or the KEY fund, Children's Initiative Fund, is exactly that. The governor had mentioned that, well, there's always an excess and we would only be spending the excess. Well, the excess can still go to early childhood development as far as I'm concerned, so I would definitely not have voted for that.
Securitization would bring in around $500 and some million, so that's where the tax increase went. Again, hate to beat a dead horse here, but doesn't solve the problem. And yeah, not willing to securitize the tobacco money. So we're back to right where we were with KDOT not fully funded, a school finance plan that's not funded, so on and so forth. CAPER's not funded fully. So that's difficult. But while I have the mic real quick, off the A&M study question, one thing that wasn't in the A&M study but that we did do in KDOT is we put $2.5 million towards the UAV program. And last session, you might remember, we created a director of unmanned aircraft systems in KDOT Aviation. And that individual is working with KDOT to do bridge inspections using drones. And they're actually saving money now because they're able to do these bridge inspections underneath without using as many staff. And they don't have to have the big cherry picker trucks that run underneath. And they also don't have to close lanes to do it. They're also able to do the top level ones using cameras instead of dragging chains over them, which then doesn't require them to close down those lanes or use as many staff to do that. So we're creating efficiencies through the use of technology, and they're doing that in partnership with universities like Kansas State Polytechnic here in Salina. So just wanted to point that out.
Okay, we'll switch gears just a little bit here. This question is your opinions on expanding CanCare and Medicaid, and that specifically references House Bill or HB 2064. And the other questions related to that are how that would impact people with disabilities, what's happening to those that are on waiting lists, and kind of the general status of CanCare.
Well, I think most of you in the audience already know how I stand on Medicaid expansion. I have been working with our physician right here in Salina, Dr. Robert Freelove, who is really one of the spearheads in trying to get this to pass. We, here in Kansas, the majority of our demographics are agriculture, rural communities, and that's where a lot of the Medicaid expansion would come into play as well, keeping some of those hospitals open. The Safety Net Clinic here, the Smoky Hill Family Practice, of which Dr. Freelove is the head chief, that, he can't express more how important it would be for us to be able to initiate and have Medicaid expansion. We're losing our hospitals out in the rural districts. They're struggling. They're just trying to keep the doors open. We have people who are needing medical care that fall between the crack. There was a young lady when I went to one of the conferences on Medicaid expansion. She's a student. She's working a job and to live and survive, but because she works at a job, she really can't afford the really expensive insurance. So she falls directly between that. She can't have the insurance. She can't qualify for some Medicaid. She falls between the cracks. And in an analysis over the states nationally, it's all the same. We're finding that people cannot afford health care that come in that. They're not Medicaid, but yet they're not able to pay the premium on health insurance. So I really truly feel that this is an important, and I'm hoping, I haven't seen the bill. I understand there is one. They're working on one. I have yet to see it, but I would definitely be voting for it.
We raised $590 million, a day ago, and we've already spent it 5 times over. I think that's the best answer I can give.
And we've definitely spent it more than once. That is absolutely right. I have supported and will vote for an expansion bill. The rural hospitals that I work with, specifically Ellsworth and Lindsborg, have stated that that's a very important piece for them. I do have more concerns now than I had several months ago. I'm not as certain that all of the funding continues at the federal level. I think that does cause us some concern as we go forward to the point that was just made. How will we fund it? Because we've given up years of funding. I think we've still got some funding that is left there, but I think it is possible that those could be returned to the state budget in fairly short order, particularly if at the federal level they're serious about the tax reform that they're talking about. I don't know where that revenue comes from to make sure that it's there. So I have more concerns about it than I did before, but I would still be voting for it.
And I would support the expansion of Medicaid funding as well, because to me it's more of an issue of fairness. Sure, there's a cost to the state that we would have to consider, but we're asking rural hospitals to be the primary care physician for their citizens who do not currently have health insurance, that cannot afford it, and so they go to the hospital treats these people, and will send them a bill knowing full well that they're not going to be paid. And if you have enough of those citizens going to the hospital out in Abilene or wherever, at a certain point, you're going to create a severe need for facilities, because some of these facilities will not be able to absorb all of the costs associated with performing as a primary care physician. So to me, it's and you're also looking at doctors that are unwilling to care for patients that, or maybe take them reluctantly, knowing that they're not going to be paid at all for their services, and you know, their services is one thing, but not even to be to generate any money for supplies, for overhead, for nursing assistants, any of that kind of thing. So to me, it's more of an issue of fairness. Let's get these people to a point where they will actually, and my guess is, once people have health insurance, they'll take a little better care of themselves. They'll go ahead and get the annual physicals. They know that they have a little bit of freedom of choice. They can select a physician instead of just using the emergency room as fallback. So in my mind, it makes sense.
Okay, next question is, do you support HB 2179, the bill to restore due process rights for teachers?
Okay. I'm glad you asked this question. This came about just this last week, that this House bill. A little bit of history. House Bill 2506, the right to due process for teachers, was a 6-decade-old policy. It has not been available since governor signed the law. Finally, after 3 years, due process rights may be restored. This is the catalyst for this bill. 2179 would restore due process rights for teachers in Kansas. If the bill is passed, the House Representative and Brownback signs it. Luckily, the bill will have an easier time passing through this year after voters selected more moderate Republicans and more Democrats. It's on here. That makes the state legislature as a whole much more moderate than it hasn't been in recent years, and that's true. We have more of a camaraderie between both parties on the House floor this year than I have seen it in the last 4 years. We're all willing to work together to get good legislation passed, or hopefully not to let bad legislation get by us. There are communities such here as in Salina that have already progressed on past this aftermath of the 2506 and have worked out some type of as Superintendent Hall was visiting with me about, that would kind of bridge that gap that was lost when due process was taken away. However, there are some areas that have not done that, and we had a hearing. We had both Mr. Tallman, Kansas Association of school teachers, all school boards rather, and then also we had the other side, KNEA, big advocates for the due process procedure. And in questioning them during the hearing, I just flat out asked them, I said, if you were to reinstate the due process, can you work together collectively to come up with a solution that would benefit all of the teachers in Kansas? If you have some adversity against due process, or if you've already, some of those regions that have already implemented another process to collectively work with our teachers, I said, can you honestly work together if we were to pass a due process law? The chair at first was reluctant to even have a hearing, but most of the committee members wanted to at least have to work the bill. It may not even pass out of committee, but it gives them an opportunity to state the reasons why they would like to have it pass out of committee. So I went down and I visited with the chair, and I said, you may not want to, we've had the hearing, we've listened to those individuals who made the trip to Topeka to talk to us about it. I said, we owe them at least the courtesy to work the bill and see if it would even pass out of committee. If it passes out of committee, let's let 125 House of Representatives decide whether or not they want this to once again. You have to look back, and I still have some real strong feelings about this, because I was in the legislature that night at 4 o'clock in the morning when teachers were sitting up in the gallery, sitting on the cold marble floors outside, and every time we would take a break, they would greet us with cheers as we walked through those house doors to go get a drink of water, and then come back and do the same thing when we walk back in. It would be very difficult, and I have to be really very above board and honest here, it would be very difficult for me to vote against a bill that would reinstate the due process if we can come where everybody is involved and come up with a solution, not to take away from what our district has already done, but at least give the teachers in our community and across the state an opportunity to have their say. So I just wanted to explain to you that there was some controversy even in our committee, but I believe that we'll take it to the floor if we can pass it out of committee, take it to the floor, and let other individuals from their districts talk about what effect it would have on their districts at this time. And that's where it stands at this point. We are going to actually have a committee meeting and work the bill on Monday.
Always passing to the left. This bill restores a mandate and takes away the local control of our school boards, who can choose to offer what level of due process they'd like to offer locally, and I therefore oppose it.
I would very much like to send positive messages to educators in every opportunity that I have. So I did vote for that budget, and that was a hard vote. The trade-off at that moment was the $90 million that we got for schools. I did talk to the members of the conference committee to get an idea of what it looked like going forward. At that point in time, I think the $90 million has done more to keep people in our classrooms than the due process hearings that we might have had over that time. And it perhaps would not have. Maybe we would have lost more the other way and giving up some fraction of that funding, because I don't think I would have lost it all. I would have expected to lose some portion of that to try and keep folks in the classroom. Going forward, I will look at both sides of that issue. The concern that I would have is the time that it can take and the cost that can be expended. Some of the administrators who did happen to talk on the bill did talk about the amount of their time that might be spent on 2 and 3 of their staff versus some of the others. And that was a concern that they had that I would listen to. I'd love to figure out, is there a way that we can provide those protections to keep good teachers in the classrooms with the degree of efficiency that is there? I appreciate that local schools can offer that. I'm glad that Salina has figured out a way to be more competitive in working to offer that. But that would be the concern that I have, that I would love to see addressed, to be able to support it wholeheartedly. And anyway, we will go from there. I think it is a good thing for us to have a debate on those issues and handle it directly, rather than in a package of other things that are also important.
This is a House bill, so I don't know much about what's going on yet. But I do know that I also like the thought of local control when it comes to things like this, and I know that Mr. Hall has that as part of the process here with 305, and I like the idea of school districts being able to negotiate that with their teachers, and I imagine that the groups of teachers across the state might have differing opinions about that. So as much as possible, I like to return things back to the local level myself. So anyway, when I'll have to see legislation if it gets to the Senate side in regards to that, but that's the way I feel personally.
I did have one question directed specifically at one legislator, but there's also a very similar question at everybody. This one says, Diana, You said that most people you heard from are in favor of campus carry. Do you think that reflects the majority of your constituents? And then to everybody, very similarly, was what will it take to get discussion on campus carry?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. You said that most people you heard from are in favor of campus carry. Do you think that reflects the majority of your constituents?
Oh, I don't remember saying that. I haven't heard from. Well, I'm not so sure about that because actually I'm not for campus carry or guns on campuses. I have nothing against the Second Amendment. You know, I don't have a gun. I just don't. I prefer not to have one around in our home. But I have been listening to them. Some of them want to be able to have it, but for the majority, it's just the opposite. So if I was misquoted or something, I'm sorry. But in fact, I had several people just yesterday from around Kansas came through and visited with us individually, and they definitely do not want to have guns on campus. My thoughts on there is especially concealed carry. In the volatile environment that we are in right at this point, you're having situations where you know that they're blaming most of it on terrorists, but even in our communities, it's just like back in the Old West when John Wayne portrayed, you know, the big pistol on his hip. I think we're regressing to that. And not everybody wants to have guns, as I mentioned earlier. And it's their right to carry. But when you're on a campus and you have a perpetrator, which unfortunately we have seen across our states, and everybody starts reaching for their gun, police officers who come there, I know they have the training to say, drop, don't touch anything or drop it. When you are in a critical crisis situation where lives are being touched, who are the good guys and who are the bad guys? How are our law enforcement individuals going to be able to determine in a split second if it's a student reaching for his gun to protect himself or if it's a perpetrator, such as in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, in the baggage claim, reach in and start shooting somebody? So I am not for concealed carry on campuses, and really the people that I have heard from have had the same idea. Is that just for me?
Similar, so maybe if just what will it take to get discussion on campus carry?
Well, what will it take to get discussion at this point? It's stalled in the House committee. I don't know if the Senate committee has a chance to get it forward. For me, this is a local control issue for me. I think that needs are different in different places, even in courthouses, hospitals, campuses, et cetera. What we're able to do in the Salina County Courthouse may be different than the resources and the setup that we have in Ottawa County. I know we've worked to address that. I'm concerned about KU Med being given a direction from me about what they have to do. I think they are in a better position to make that decision, whether it is safer or less safe. I think the same is true as we look at our campuses. I also support the right to carry. I have guns. I am not talented enough or clear-sighted enough to be any help in a heavy public setting, but I'm somewhat useful where I know where everything is at home. So anyway, that would be my thought, is that the local control is there. I think it was working adequately before we changed the law, and I would go with where we were on the carry issues.
And I'm also big on local control. I like to be consistent. And I think that the people, the government closest to the people, knows the people best and are best able to answer those questions and deal with those types of issues. And campus carry falls into that same category. I would prefer that either the schools or the Board of Regents tackle that question instead of having the legislature sending down another possibly unfunded mandate to the local levels of government. It was take this one step farther. In the Capitol building itself, you can concealed carry. I don't even know why we have a metal detector, frankly. I was asking and of course legislators carry. You probably heard about Representative Willie Dove that left his loaded pistol in one of the committee rooms. That was really, in education, that was really smart. So the thing that really caught my attention, though, I was asking the security people at the entrance, the visitor entrance. I said, well then, why do we have these metal detectors? And he said, well, they don't really mean much anymore. Maybe we're looking for a bomb. And I said, well, and so the people come to the building, we don't even know how many people are concealed carry. He said, no, not really. Or how many people are in the gallery? No, there's no way to know. But we do tell everybody that walks through and it says they're concealed carry, we tell them, if there's an issue, please do not draw your weapon. We'll take care of it. And so there you go. There's the answer.
Okay, it looks we have about 15 minutes left, so we've got...
We didn't hear from JR.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought...
Thank you. I supported the bill when it passed the first time around, and I haven't changed my mind since.
With the current job market, what are your thoughts and ideas on filling state jobs, rewarding current employees, and getting economic growth jobs back in the state?
So on state jobs in particular, that is one where we have not had increases in pay for some time. There have been some chances to move up a grade or things such as that, but as for a pay increase, it's been 9 years since there's been one. As we are in an unemployment area in a lot of our state that's under 3%, it will be very hard to keep those jobs filled without looking at some level of increase. So I'm spending the $590 once again. So that is going to be key. We are at staffing levels where we are low in being able to provide services that are there. I was trying to get an issue addressed with the Department of Transportation in a couple of areas along Highway 4, and just having staff that can respond to issues. We're thin on a lot of things. So in any direction, whether it is more people as well as more salary, that is going to continue to be upward pressure on the budget. There are other areas that are the same. If you compare all of the areas from private sector, inflation, different segments, the state employee group is the lowest on increases in salary over time. So I'm not sure if that was all of the direction of the question, but some of the thoughts.
That's 590 that we're bouncing around goes only to fill the hole. It does nothing to help any of the proposed pay increases or anything like that that probably are warranted at this point, since there have been no pay increases for 8 years. You know, the problem happens that you have to address one way or the other. Sure, we can go, and we're going to go another 2 years without pay increases. That's already determined. But at some point, when you lose the knowledge and the experience of these people in the state jobs, the ones that have been there for 15 and 20 years and really have gotten good at their job, if they decide to leave because they can no longer afford to work with you anymore after you've given them increases in health insurance premiums every year, they'll go somewhere else, and I don't blame them. And then you bring in a new person, and guess what? You're going to spend that extra money that you could have given them as a pay increase to train somebody new. And it'll take that new person at least a couple years to get a good handle on the job and to become really efficient at it. So it's expensive, but it's expensive either way. And in my mind, why not keep the good people? Sure, there are people that once they leave, you may be able to say, well, you know what? I think we can get by without rehiring. That's a thing we ought to look at as well. But we also need to think about, let's just use some common sense here, folks.
Whenever we're looking at a budget for the different entities, you know, they always say the FTEs and the ones who are classified, the ones that are unclassified. You know, they're always talking about those individuals who work. Let's just take the State House, for instance. I wish I could clone my office assistant and bring her back here to help me in my business here in Salina. She is so efficient, and you watch all of these office assistants for the various legislators and the Senate side. I mean, we could not do our work without them. Just getting in preparation for today, there are so many bills that we are not all aware of because they're coming out of different committees, and so it makes it difficult for us at some point to be able to answer the questions that you ask, because simply we are not in that committee, and we're targeted on what we're doing, and we're not, unless it comes to the House floor. That's when they explain and give us the bill briefs. I would not be able to do all of that if it were not for my office assistant. She is there. She's on time every day. She doesn't want to take time off. Yesterday we got out early, and it was like 20 minutes before she was really scheduled to leave, and I said, "Get out of here now," just to give her an incentive. We try to treat them just as generously as we can, but unfortunately we're not able to raise their salary. I would love to be able to do that, but at this point in time, with the condition of our economic environment in our state, I just don't see that we're going to be able to do too much at all. But if there was at any point an opportunity for us to do so, and that the funds would be there, they would definitely be on my radar to give them a raise.
I can only solve the problems that are in front of me, so I'll go through a few things that we've done already. We've done a 10% raise for our Kansas Highway Patrol officers through my committee. That's passed, is in place. The Kansas Bureau of Investigation is now a part of that pay plan. We're slowly creating a unified pay plan across our law enforcement agencies. And then just a few weeks ago, I was able to proviso the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks and Tourism law enforcement officers onto that pay plan as well, giving them a significant raise. So there are some areas where we are able to make a difference, and we also made sure that those officers stay classified positions through that proviso. Our corrections officers, we did $2.5 million in raises. We have an additional proviso to increase pay for proviso officers and other staff who were not included in that original raise. There is a savings increase off of the Lansing project that would give another $1 million in pay increases to our corrections officers. So we're certainly focused on solving problems, and especially the problems that are sitting in front of us. The Department of Transportation is another issue that we'll start to look at resolving as we stabilize our state highway fund. But to give you an idea of what we're able to accomplish, we did accomplish several things in the way of pay raises for our state employees, and it's important to us that we do that and recognize their service, especially those who are in a law enforcement capacity. We'll also, in this transportation budget, proviso a program that allows a local match through KDOT to place lead researchers for grant projects in our universities that are participants in the research triangle. That's part of our UAS proviso that we did last session, and that includes K-State Polytechnic, so that we can start bringing in big research projects directly here in Salina. It's important to us. It's important to our community. Research does mean jobs, and that's probably the best thing that we can do for our communities is bring in premium wage jobs.
A few minutes over because we had that last question, but we would like to offer a few minutes for closing remarks from each of you.
Well, that's handy. Well, thank you again to the Chamber. Thank you to AT&T for sponsoring. Appreciate everyone coming out on their Saturday morning to spend time with us. If you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Happy to address any concerns that you have. Thanks.
Thanks to all of you for attending today. It's really important that we have these forums for us to be able to answer your questions. Again, thanks to AT&T and the Chamber and those who were involved in putting this together. I really truly feel that we are trying desperately to make some sort of leeway in our budget crisis here. We're working collectively together. Again, you know, the tax committee has certainly been working diligently. They have earned every single penny that they're receiving, and hopefully that we, as a task force, can be able to get by and explain to each and every, especially we have a lot of new representatives this year, and you know, I mentor two of them, and just to let them know what exactly and answer their questions so that they feel that they are voting the way that their heart and their district tells them to, but at least answer some questions and concerns that they have. So we'll continue in those efforts, and hopefully that things will be brighter at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks again to everyone for being here. Good questions, and Mr. Walker, a good job giving us a breadth of them, which I think was useful. So in areas where we aren't directly agreeing, let's keep the dialogue going so that we can work those issues out thoroughly. And I am encouraged that a lot of things have been discussed in the legislature. I am encouraged that there is some growth, as Representative Clay has referenced, that is happening in different areas. I hope the low unemployment and other things can help us so that there's some wind at our backs rather than as a headwind that we face as we try and make everything work. It has been encouraging to have the dialogue between members of the chamber, between chambers. I've been more encouraged by that. While progress can certainly be greater, in the limited time I've been there, the magnitude of the change, the speed of the change, and the breadth of support of some of those major issues is different than what I've heard has happened all of the time. So it feels better to be a part of that. Not that any of it is easy, but I'm optimistic that we can continue working through a number of the big issues that are laid out there and try and get a feel for what many in the state really want to be the solution. So thanks for your guidance in helping us find that.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. Before I forget, I have a clipboard in the back. I have a weekly newsletter that I produce, and if you'd like to receive that, I'd be more than happy to send it to you. Just give me your name and email address back there. And for opening remarks, I didn't have a chance to tell you anything that was going on in any of my committees. I just thought I'd give you a couple of ideas about what's going on there. In transportation, this is kind of a fluff bill, but it's important, I think. There's a portion of I-70 between Salina and Abilene that we've passed out of committee that would be called John Carlin Highway to honor him. We have something that digital assets are being discussed in judiciary. Digital assets means that just like other assets that you have, when you die, those assets are passed on to heirs. Well, how about your digital assets? What happens to them? We're looking at a bill that would provide a way for those assets to be passed on to your heirs as well. For instance, with Gmail right now, there's a setting that you can select that will provide access to your account if you die for whatever reason to a beneficiary, someone that you designate, so that all of your material in Gmail will not be lost forever. So that's kind of an interesting thing. One other thing, too, in judiciary that we're talking about is we're looking at a bill that would provide compensation for people that are wrongfully imprisoned. And right now we're looking at the amount is $80,000 a year. The kicker to the bill, though, to me is that if you were wrongfully executed, you can get $5 million. It doesn't help you very much. But that one really caught my eye. So anyway, thank you once again for coming. I appreciate it and your interest.
Thank you to all the legislators for coming. We sure appreciate it. Wanted to let everybody know that the next meeting will be March 18th, same time and same place. Thanks everybody again and appreciate the comments.